Minister, I listened to you carefully. And your government has led a divisive campaign in relation to refugees and asylum seekers. And you've led to a situation where we've had two tiers. We had the Ukrainians coming in with full rights, as opposed to those ensconced in direct
fact that we have with fairness,
refugees and asylum.
with fairness and with compassion.
Minister, I listened to you carefully. And your government has led a divisive campaign in relation to refugees and asylum seekers. And you've led to a situation where we've had two tiers. We had the Ukrainians coming in with full rights, as opposed to those ensconced in direct provision. You're a government that has stood over direct provision for over 24 years that wasn't fit for purpose. Numerous reports, starting with the modest reports from Judge McMahon at the time, and going on then to the Catherine Day report, and a decision made by government, which I welcomed: stop direct provision. Stop the serious for-profit system that was undermining human rights and feeding into a horrible narrative. I too have gone through the elections supporting people or not recently and experienced that narrative, which I deplore. But you've had a role in that. You've had an absolute... Today the headlines is you're going to bring legislation to revoke people's citizenship. Now, can you imagine the narrative that you're feeding into? And I come from Galway City and County, and I have watched what happened. To my dismay and my horror, I have deplored the comments made going back in Oughterard, which I described as the worst meeting of my life. And then I saw what happened in Roscahill and lately in Carrow. And all of that time, ye have learned nothing. Absolutely nothing. In Carrow, and I absolutely deplore the comments. I would lose votes rather than support any of those type of comments or narrative. But you've persisted with the policy of taking over hotels, of not giving extra services to the area, and the added insult of there'll be English classes in a Gaeltacht area. And I just mentioned that as small examples of your utter failure to learn and utter failure to deal with direct provision in a more human way and deal with the people coming into our country seeking asylum. Not immigrants, people seeking asylum, and under international law we have obligations to look after those, make quick decisions. Yes, if they're not entitled to asylum, certainly a quick return. None of that has happened. And you've allowed this horrible narrative, which I deplore, to build up. Whether Ireland is full, whether we can take any more, absolutely horrible language. And here we are now with this pact, and there are 7 parts to it, and nobody has explained why there's only one vote. Maybe I'm wrong. Is it one vote on 7 individual parts? No explanation as to why that's going to happen. No ability for us to tease this out, because it went to the Justice Committee. Do you remember that? For one day. And there was pressure of time to get it debated in the Dáil before the actual one day when people come in to make presentations. Indeed, I understand the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission is on record for saying they did not have enough time to make a presentation. Can you imagine an organisation of that status didn't have enough time to make a submission on this? And we were led to believe it had to be pushed through before the local elections and the European, and suddenly it didn't have to. Just like the referendum that was supposed to be held. That was put off as well in relation to, the name escapes me now, the copyright. That just went by the board as well, even though we were told that had to be held. And suddenly this was not done before the elections. And here we are now. And I'm absolutely on your side with the tenor of what you're saying, Minister, actually, in relation to the unacceptable nature and our obligations. My difficulty is what's happened here with the European project and the lens that we're looking down, the tunnel vision that we have. And I speak here today, the Irish Times today, telling us of the situation in the Sudan. And what is it? Yeah, Sally Hayden. We are looking for help. We are looking for humanity. An impossible situation. 10 million people displaced in Sudan. What are we doing? Absolutely nothing. My leader's question today was on Palestine, being slaughtered. What are we doing? We're waiting for our big sisters and brothers in Europe to tell us what to do. Oh, yes, we are. And you're going to vote for van der Leyen. And then we're going to, I'll use my time, Minister, if you don't mind. I didn't interrupt you. And so what are we looking at here? We're looking at a situation where the UN estimates that at the end of 2023, more than 117 million displaced people in the world. 117, I understand it's gone up to 20, it's almost 120 million now displaced people. What are we doing about that, Minister? What lens are we looking to see what's happening in the world? What voice are we using? Are we using our voice of neutrality, independent sovereign state, to say, what's happening here? How we as a small country, what will we contribute to that debate? And I think our voice is much stronger given our history, and I'd like to hear it. If there's 120 million people displaced, no amount of border protection, no amount of detention centres, no amount of prisons or walls are going to sort that out. And I, for one, for as long as I'm here, whether it's a few weeks or a few more years, I'm going to use my voice to say, that is wrong. Do not build Europe up as a fortress. We have Mr. Borrell telling us that everything outside the walls of Europe is a jungle. Remember that? We have van der Leyen telling us that what Netanyahu is doing is okay. And that's the type of Europe. I won't be part of that Europe, and I'm a committed European. An absolute committed European. I've had the privilege of living in Germany and learning the language and having family there. I'm a committed European, but a European in a different sense than what van der Leyen is telling us and Borrell. And so when we look at this pact with its 7 parts that we're not even allowed vote on individually, we look at what the NGOs have told us. We look at what, I can pick any paper, the Irish Refugee Council, 161 NGOs who called on the members of the European Parliament to vote against the pact, that it will have devastating implications for the right to international protection and greenlights abuses across Europe, including racial profiling, default de facto detention and pushbacks. The briefing paper prepared by the Irish Refugee Council, we believe the reforms reflect an effort to limit access to protection for refugees in Europe. They will result in less safeguards, increased detention and destitution among people seeking protection. I could go on. I realise that other submissions made on the day said there were some good things and some bad things in the pact. I realise that. I've read every one of them. But overall, this pact is channeling a discussion in a particular fashion and in a particular way and for a particular narrative that allows people that have been called on the right to use it in a way that suits their arguments, as opposed to saying, how do we stand together in true solidarity with the 600 people that went down on a ship this month last year? I didn't hear van der Leyen saying one word about those 600 people. And last night, I didn't get to see, but I hope to, a BBC 2 documentary on what's happening with the Greeks under pressure and what they're doing, throwing people back into the water, and the figures all given. And how do we stand in solidarity with the countries in the world that are the poorest, that are taking the most asylum seekers and refugees? I would have loved if one of the ministers, or the Taoiseach or the Taoiseach, had quoted the figures and the countries who are the poorest, taking in the most. And Europe's percentage of refugees and asylum seekers has gone down significantly over the last number of years. The richest entity that's on its way to becoming a power, a military power and an empire that talks about a rules-based order within its walls, while everything outside of that doesn't deserve respect. People treated with utter contempt, as if people go into a ship for the love of it, for the fun of it, to get fresh air in the Mediterranean. They're running for their lives. They're running from appalling conditions. And what we're not looking at here today, nor is Europe, what part Europe is playing in those conditions, with the type of business that we're pursuing and the type of model that we're pursuing. And we'll take a little tiny look at this and say we're standing in solidarity. We're making a mockery of language, because we're certainly not standing in solidarity with those that need our help. And van der Leyen does not need our help, but our voices need to be heard. And they need to be heard loud and clear to say, yes, we have challenges in relation to the amount of asylum seekers and refugees that are running from their countries. We need to ask why. We need to see what Europe, and we as part of Europe, are going to do about that. And we need to make words mean something when we stand in solidarity. And we show some human outrage at 600 people that we know about that went down in one ship, and it still continues to this day. I won't be supporting the pact.